Okay, so here in the auth controller, we are going to write user sign in and refresh token APIs. Sign in is simple. We are going to use API v1 auth routes, auth controller, auth service, and here we are going to use GWT strategies, and then later we will create auth guards and all. So we will just refactor this controller and make it look like make it look like compatible with auth controller. I just copied the user controller as it is, just to avoid the typing the same thing again and again. Here inside DTO, we are going to create a user sign in DTO that will ask you for entering the email and password. So it is user sign in DTO, and the DTO we are going to create inside auth. Let's say auth request DTO.ts. Then we will create another is auth response DTO.ts, export class user sign in DTO, and we will copy a couple of things from the existing code, and then we will change the properties. Here we need two properties in sign in. One is email and another is password. So email is already there. We'll just change it to password. It is required. And then we will pass this DTO in the sign in controller. So password should be defined, both are required, and user sign in DTO that we are going to pass in this, and let's import it. And then we are going to create a auth service. And in auth service, we are going to create a particular method, let's say simple sign in. So let's create a auth service, and inside auth service, we will define these method validate user by password. Okay, and then this method we have to create inside a user service. So this is also going to be injectable class, export class auth service. And then inside that we are going to define this particular method. There will be a constructor. There we are going to do a dependency injection, and then it will be injectable class, and inside constructor we can inject the logger, we can inject user service, we can inject config service, all sort of service which we need, because we need config service to get some of the config parameters to create a token and all. So first of all, we will inject the user service, and user service is dependent on auth service. Also auth service is dependent on user service. There is a cyclic dependency. So how we will import it? We will import it using inject forward reference user service. That means auth service is using user service, and user service can also use auth service. And here we are going to import other services like private read only config service, and we'll pass the config service instance. Okay, that's it. Now we will just define this method, validate user by password. So here we are passing the payload which contains the email and the password, and then we will start validating things inside this method. Here we will check first the email exists in the user database. If yes, then we will check the password is matching with the database password or not with the bcrypt compare password method. So here first we will just check if the user exists with this email ID. So we can just use this user service method, user service dot find by email. This is how we are going to use user service inside auth service, and there is a dependency injection already done for that. So const user equal to this dot user service, await this dot user service dot find one by email, and you pass the email property. If the user exists, then we are good. If not, then you can throw a user not found exception, or you are not authenticated, but simply you can throw is not found exception. That means the email you provided doesn't exist in the system. You may customize this response and send some customized response by extending the not found exception. You can create your own exception like export class user not found exception extends the not found exception, and then you send a inside a constructor super, you can send your own custom message. Let's say is match false initially, and if the match is true, then we can generate a token through the sign in process. Here let's match the password. Now whatever the password we have in the payload and whatever the password in the database, so we will use compare password utility. So is match equal to this dot compare password. Compare password is async method, so we have to await this also, and we are going to pass two properties, the entered password and the database password. So the first argument is the entered password and another argument is the database password, and here we need to await this dot user service. This is user dot password, and then we define this method async compare password, and this is the private method because only internal method is calling it. Private async compare password, and you pass two arguments, entered password and the database password, and then you just do is return this dot return bcrypt dot compare uh, entered password comma the database password. If it is returning true, that means both the password strings are same. If false, that means whatever the password you have entered, that is not same as the hash value of the password stored inside a database. We will just import bcrypt from the bcrypt module, and then we will just use bcrypt dot compare, I guess that is the method. Bcrypt dot await bcrypt dot compare password, I mean simple compare entered password and the database password. That's it. If match is found, if is match true, otherwise if there is a failure, then it will throw an error directly here. Let's say if is match not found, if is match is true, then we can just get the token equal to this dot now generate token or create token. We just pass the user, and that's it. Just the payload means this is the, I mean we need to pass the user object which is representing this email. So we'll just pass this user, and we are going to call this method private async create token. It will take a user object of type user entity, and then we'll just create a token by passing some arguments. We are going to use a gwt service. Let's say here it is of type user entity, and then here we are going to do a couple of things. So here first of all, let's say the expiry. What is the expiry of this token? So we haven't set any parameter in the configuration. First let's create a config for the authentication. There we can put two properties, expiry and auth secret, I mean token secret, because to create a token you need to encrypt, you need to also pass the token secret and the token expiry. For now let's create expire in, that is of type number. So you will pass the number of seconds, and then we'll convert that into millisecond by multiplying that by 1000. So this is auth config, and then we will just do the same thing. We'll populate the default interface, and we will put that inside a config service. Here it is auth, and it which has a property expire in, that is of type number 3000. Let's say this is the default value, and inside config service now it is invalid because we need to pass the auth object. Auth object has an expire in property that we can get from the environment, env dot let's say token expiry, and we need to convert it into a number that is in seconds, that these many seconds you are giving for the token expiry. And then we can use this property in our auth service. This is like auth dot expiring, and then we will just create the expire value, because expiry, let's say the 2 hours, so 2 hours from the current time plus the seconds of the 2 hours, that will be the expiry of the token. So if expiration initially should be of type date or undefined, and then if expire in property is set from the config, you will create a expiration will be new date from the current date of new date, I mean current time of the current date plus the expiring value, that will be the expiration we are putting for the token. And then expiration dot set date, expiration dot get time, I think get time, and then you can add the number of seconds based on the expire in multiply by 1000 milliseconds. So it should be in seconds. The expire in property we are setting in the environment variable, and then we will just create a payload which we wanted to set inside a token, JWT token we are generating, and we are going to use nestjs JWT for that we also need to add inside a auth module. Here JWT payload will be anything like user ID, you can put email, you can put permissions is required for authorization later, and then we will put the expire in property, like what is the expiry of this particular token after it is returned from the login API, successful login API. Okay, and then we can just call this dot jwt dot sign, but we haven't introduced the JWT nestjs JWT yet. So what we need to do is we need to use this JWT service which is provided by nestjs JWT, and we need to return the data and the token, whatever the token we are generating from this. So here we will just add private read only JWT service. From the JWT service we need to add through nestjs JWT. I think yes, nestjs JWT, and we will add it in the auth service. And once we add that, we can just get the JWT service from the JWT nestjs JWT, and then if we are using a service, obviously we need to add the nestjs JWT module inside auth module. Let's say this is the auth module we are creating. Here we are using two things: passport module for authorizing the request that we are going to use later, but we need a nestjs JWT module right now. Passport module also we need, so we can import that using same npm install -- save passport module. And then first of all, I think passport module is available or not. Let's check. This is coming from nestjs passport, and here we are going to use passport module. So passport module .4 register, and here we are passing the default properties, like default strategy is JWT and session is false. And then we are going to initialize the nestjs JWT module, and here important part is how we are initializing it. There are multiple methods available: jwt.module.register, register async. We are using register async because we want to dynamically initialize this JWT module. Otherwise we can also use simple .register and we just pass it. So here we are going to use another module to inject the dynamic configuration. So we are using register async method. Here we are going to pass the token secret and the expiry of the token. All these properties we are going to pass dynamically through external module. So we are going to use the same process whatever we have used for database module, db module dot root async, and then we were passing, injecting the config service and getting the values, the JWT module options from the configurations. JWT module options are like what is the secret you are passing, what is the expiration of the token, all those properties like secret we are going to get from the config service .get.auth. Currently I think we have only one property there. We can add another property is like a secret value which is of type string, and we will get the secret from same as we are getting the expiry. So here we in the auth service we will just set secret equal to env dot maybe token secret or some environment variable which we are going to put in the .env to pass the secret to create the token through this nestjs JWT module. So token secret we are passing now expire in. So in the auth dot secret, and then if you have an expiry already set, so that we can check using config service .get.auth .expire in. If expiry already set, you can also set the same expiry value to this token here, option.sign in option, and you can set expire in. Let's say you put a 15 minute. So you can just put the same 15-minute here, config service.auth expire in, and expire in will be taken as I think in seconds. And here inside in this module I can check what is the values which it is expecting. So there are all these options expire in, that is in seconds. So this is our GWT module. Here imports use factory, and then I have to inject the config service, so that config service can be used by this GWT module to initialize it. And then this is auth module. Auth module is using user service, so we have to use, you have to add user module inside a auth module so that you can use user service inside a auth service. So you will use a forward reference because there is a cyclic dependency, forward reference user module, and then any other module like config module, app logger module you wanted to add inside auth module, you can just add them. Currently I think we don't have a user module created, so I will just copy this syntax and just remove whatever, just keep only the things which we need for the user module. I mean, I thought like user module is already created, it's a totally empty class. And here we will add a user controller, user service inside provider, and exports. What is the use of exports? If you are putting some service inside export, that means this service can be used by other modules when you are putting that module inside a dependency of other module. Okay, we will just delete all the unused imports and then import the controller. So this is my user module, and this user module I will add inside a domain module and add a dependency inside a auth module. Okay, so we are kind of pretty much close to achieving something. Here I will put the user module, and then app logger module I can also add a config module. So here I will pass the auth controller, auth service. So providers we already have, I will add the auth service, and then inside exports I will add auth service. So I have now auth module and the user module ready, and we can just add the user module and auth module in the domain module, and then we can think of start testing these APIs. Even if they are working, we'll just do npm run build and see this gwt service dot I think dot sign, and we are just passing the data, so it will just generate access token and give it to us. So this is a basic sign in and the sign up APIs we have created. Now we'll start testing it. Okay, now let's see our app is running. We will just update the user module. We'll introduce a config module, logger module, and so what is the user module is doing? So db module.for root, because we are using the user entity inside the user service. We are accessing the user repository, and then let's see, we will just compile it, and then we will also do the forward reference of auth module, because user module is dependent on auth module is dependent on the user modules. There is a cyclic dependency, so we have to use the forward reference to avoid it. Okay, I think I added at the rate extra, I mean that is not required here, and that will fix our problem. So this forward reference we are doing with the auth module, and we also added a logger module and the config module, so that completes our user module. Now user module, auth module we can add in the domain module, user module, auth module, and then now we can start doing npm run build, and we will fix the import locations, because somewhere we are importing it from src config, src logger. So npm run start, I think it will give us a lot of errors, I guess, because we are not importing a lot of things. Nest start, and you can see a lot of errors are there. This is validate by, okay, let's find them one by one. Okay, this method in the user sign up we are not using, so we will delete this method. We will add a couple of more methods in the user controller, but for now let's remove it. And then what are the other errors? In the auth controller and auth service, we see a couple of more errors. So here we will create a auth response.dto.ts, and based on the auth response, what we are returning two properties. I mean, user ID, email, expiry in permissions, and the access token. These are the two properties we are returning from the sign-in. So we will create a response DTO for it, and with that response DTO we can add inside a auth controller saying so that the same can appear in the Swagger documentation, that okay, after doing login you will get the response with the user ID, email, permissions, expiration of the token, and access token. So all these properties we can define: API okay response, description, and the type. User logged in successfully, and the type you will just, we have recently created a user response auth response DTO. That same response DTO we can put inside a type, that is user sign in the response DTO. I mean, later we will just modify it, we'll put all the required properties inside it. The properties can be user ID, email, and all those things. So let's see what we are returning from this API. API internal response, that will be again some description you can put. The same can be updated in the Swagger. In the Swagger it will tell okay, this API returns all these response codes 400, 500, 200. So that will be just updated in the Swagger doc, and front end people, whoever is the consumer, will know okay, this the expected response code from this API is all these. And then a bad response is okay, let's say if you are not passing the email and the password based on the selected criteria, it will return a 400. That is a bad request because the client is not sending the required payload to this particular API. Okay, now the type we can update here, validate username password, and once the user ID is match, we are just revisiting the code. If match is found, we are just returning the token. We can just customize the exceptions we are creating. Okay, so this data we are returning, and this properties, so we can modify the response DTO including all those things: user ID, email, permissions, expirations, and access token. So we are using API response property. Like API property we are using for request DTO. For response DTO we are using API response property. That works in the same way, but these API response properties for the response properties, like this API particular HTTP API will return this kind of payload, and same payload will be exposed in the Swagger because it is reading all these annotations: API okay response API, created response API, internal server error response API, bad request response, and the same will be available in the Swagger. So we are just writing a response DTO. We'll update some sample examples how the response payload look like, and then we will rebuild it and we will see what are the other errors which we need to fix to get the APIs up and running. And then we will do a small demo, okay, how our APIs are working. We'll just do a simple login by entering the email password. First we will create a user in the system, and then we will do the login with that same user credential, and we will see if user has been created and we got the access token after doing login. So now if I do npm run build again, start again, we can run this in the watch mode, npm run start dev, and we will keep fixing the import locations everywhere wherever the errors are. So this is from the config service, this is from the config module. Okay, this is reporting error inside some DTO, validate type. Before that I will fix the import locations for the logger module and the config module, and then it's inside a user request DTO. This validate type is not available in the class validator. I think that is the problem. So validate type, should be coming from the class transformer. Let me check the documentation. So we will import this from the class transformer, and that will be import type as a validate type from the class transformer. So we will remove the validate type from the class validator. Import type as, I think that is the same in the documentation, import type as validate type. So that is for the nested payload validation. We use validate type and the validate nested from the class transformer, and then we will use validate type. Here the same validate type we will populate inside our DTO. We'll just copy this and we'll just use it here. And now it's working. We got all the errors fixed. Passport module is not there, so that's a valid error. We'll open another terminal. We'll try to get the passport module, and once the passport module is installed, we will just, because we are running in the watch mode, this application will run again. Okay, we imported this, added this package, I think at the different place. We have to add it in the auth service, that is inside the packages, not inside the root module. Let's okay, we have added this, and now we are getting something else. User repository provider, is it a part of current module? And then okay, user repository is actually, we are accessing user repository inside a user service. So we need to use, we can just try dbmodule.for root. I never saw this because we are already using dbmodule.for root in the domain module. That means all the entities we are already passing as entities array, then it should not report this error. dbmodule.for root is taking object as an input, which is having entities, and passing all the entities. Currently we have only user entity in the system, so it's an array, and we can just pass the user entity. It, we are still getting this user repository is a provider, it's not part of user module. So what we will try to do is, this is auth module. I think we need to add a typeorm module.for feature inside a user module, and we just need to pass the entity. Okay, this is the entity this particular module is going to access, so that user repository will be available for that services to consume, because we are injecting user repository inside the injectable service. So we'll go to user module and typeorm module.for feature. Okay, and tada, I think now this is working. This is really most important, but I need to still think, is this the right way? Because without even doing this should work, because at the root module we are using type dbmodule.for root, and we are passing all the entities. For now our services are working, and we can see how all these things are running. We have only two APIs, one is sign in and one is sign up. And here I'm trying, so this, you can see this documentation, nicely written documentation is coming, because we are using these Swagger annotations: API property, API response property, API OK response, API created response, all those things. Here we are just testing a simple user sign up. It should create a user in the database. Currently we need to mark this password as a select false, so that whenever it does the query to the database, password should not populate as a property in the response. And then we can do the login. We will just try with the hello one, demo one, and then hello demo. That is the password. So when I do this, we are getting internal server error. I guess we are missing something. Okay, we are missing one environment variable, that will go inside env, and we will see what is the environment variable value inside our config service. I think we are missing two properties, expire in and token secret, that we can get from config service. So from config service we will get the exact values what we need to put in the .env. It's like JWT token secret and token expiry. So we'll put that, and we'll just put a random string. This string will be used to create your token from the by the Nest JS JWT module. And the token expiry, these are the number of seconds, and you restart the application and try to do the login again. we still need to improve tons of things here. And now you can see we are getting the data and the access token. This data we need to destructure because the API documentation tells us different story. Now we will improve a lot of other things, and we will see that in the next video.